Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amy Weiss, and I work with Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros. Today we're announcing the Independent Compensation Program for victim survivors of sexual abuse of minors by priests. First, some housekeeping. I'll introduce each speaker, and then we'll have a short video with Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros, who are the administrators of the plan. Unfortunately, they couldn't be with us today, but they are on the phone, and they'll be available for questions. Please hold your questions till the end, and then when you do ask questions, please identify yourself and your media outlet. First, I'll introduce the Oversight Committee, and there are full bios of the Oversight Committee and Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros in your press kits. Governor Gray Davis was elected the 37th governor of California in 1998, winning 58% of the vote. As governor, he made education a top priority. While presiding over California during an economic expansion, Governor Davis made record investments in infrastructure, creating 4 centers for science and innovation at the UC campuses, and expanded state health insurance for an additional 1 million children. Despite a Republican wave of victories across the nation in 2002, Mr. Davis was reelected to a second term. He is now of counsel at the Los Angeles firm of Loeb & Loeb and is also a senior fellow of UCLA School of Public Affairs. Secretary Leon Panetta served as our 23rd Secretary of Defense. Before he was the Secretary of Defense, he served as the Director of the CIA. He dedicated much of his life to public service. He and his wife, Sylvia, started the Leon and Sylvia Panetta Institute for Public Policy, based in California State University, Monterey Bay. The Institute is nonpartisan, nonprofit, and seeks to instill in young men and women the virtues and values of public service. From July 1994 to January 1997, he served as Chief of Staff to President Clinton. Prior to that, he was the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, a position that he built over his years in the House of Representatives when he served as the Chairman of the House Budget Committee. Maria Contreras-Sweet is an expert in economic growth, job creation, and competitiveness. Internationally acclaimed for her insights on growth and innovation, she's also sought after for her tactical insights for American businesses from a financial and economic standpoint. She was widely praised for the work she did, and she did this on the national level when she served as President Obama's cabinet as administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. On the telephone, we have the independent claims administrators, Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros. Ken Feinberg is one of the nation's leading experts in mediation, alternative dispute resolutions. He served in many, many roles as a special master, a mediator, an arbitrator in hundreds of high-profile disputes and settlements. He and Camille Byros are overseeing similar programs to this one we're announcing today in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Mr. Feinberg currently serves as a special master of Terrorism Victim Compensation Fund from the Department of Justice. They have both served in the pro bono capacity over a number of compensation funds, including the Virginia Tech University, the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shootings, the Boston Marathon bombings, the Pulse nightclub shooting, and of course the 9/11 Victims Fund. In 2010, he was appointed by Obama and BP to serve as the administrator of the Gulf Coast Claims Facility following the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Camille Byros serves as the administrative director and business manager at the law offices of Kenneth R. Feinberg, PC. In that role, she works with Mr. Feinberg in the administration of claims. She and Mr. Feinberg develop, design, implement, and supervise all of the programs, the policies and procedures, and processing claims for various compensation programs. Prior to joining the law firm of Kenneth R. Feinberg, she was administrator at K. Scholler, a law firm in Washington, and also worked alongside Mr. Feinberg in the office of Senator Edward M. Kennedy. So first I will turn it over to Governor Davis, who will make some remarks.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon. I want to thank Ken and Camille, who are the administrators of this program. Their decisions are final. They cannot be appealed to our board or to the church. They have a long history of adjudicating disputes, starting with 9/11, and we have every confidence that they will do it fairly and with the victim's best interest at heart. There's no cap, there's no limit, there's no fund. whatever compensation they deem is appropriate for individuals, and in the aggregate, the church will abide by. I'm also honored to serve with two very distinguished public servants, Leon Panetta, who I've known since he was with OEP, way back in the Nixon era back then. I was kidding him afterwards, I don't know who has more cabinet positions, George Shultz or Leon, but they're neck and neck, and he has to serve with great distinction in every post that he has held. Maria Contreras-Sweet is a phenomenal public servant. I was honored that she served as my Secretary of Business and Transportation for all 5 years. Many problems beyond that jurisdiction she helped solve for us, and like anything that happens in Vegas, all that will stay in Las Vegas. But just kidding, she is as good as you can get, and I'm honored to have the three of us form the Oversight Committee. Our role is primarily to ensure that the procedures and protocols are followed. But before I get into too much detail, I just want to make one point. So when I was governor, I had a particular interest in helping victims. Way back in the 80s, I was very interested in the missing children, milk carton programs. As governor, I signed the Amber Alert, along with introducing the electronic highway signs. More than 200 kidnapped children were rescued. In 2002, I also was pleased to sign a bill extending the statute of limitations, allowing the victims of sexual abuse to file a claim if they had not yet done so. As a result of that, more than $1.2 billion in compensation was delivered to deserving victims. So when I learned of the Independence Compensation Program earlier this year, I see this as another remedy for victims, particularly those victims who are still suffering the pain of sexual abuse, but do not want to communicate that to their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers. You know, they're happy to do something in private with an independent arbitrator, but never had that opportunity before. So I commend the church for establishing a program that helps those people who don't want to write a book, don't want to be in a public trial, don't want to take a public deposition, but do want to be compensated for the pain that they endured. This program will allow that to happen. How many people that will be, we will see. But I think it is again, I commend the church for taking this positive step. Like a lot of Catholics, I am conflicted. I believe this is the right thing to do, but I'm also mindful that some priests over the many years have inflicted a lot of pain and harm. The good news is that victims will decide whether this program will help them or not, and I believe they'll find that it does, and I'm pleased that this is being offered to them. Finally, all three of us on the Oversight Committee believe that there is more to compensation than just writing a check. Yes, it's great to have money in your pocket, but you also need someone to help you move on with your life. And so we all ask the church to provide compensation for 12 counseling sessions. And as someone who worked with the victims of violent crime as a governor, worked with people whose children were kidnapped during the Amber Alert, I know the pain lasts for a very long time, and money alone, while helpful, is not sufficient for closure. So our committee is optimistic that these counseling sessions from independent therapists of the victim's choosing will help them move on, become productive people, and understand while this was a bad thing that happened to them, there's still life to be lived and productive things and enjoyable things and happy things to be experienced. So that really is our role, is to oversee the process, which I'm sure Ken and Camille will observe, and to ensure that victims have the counseling and therapy they may require. If they don't require it, that's totally up to them. But we want to provide that opportunity because our hope is not only do they have money in their pocket, but they actually have a new outlook on life. Yes, they experience some pain and some difficult circumstances that are never to be minimized, but they still have life to live, and hopefully this counseling will assist them. The last point I want to make is that Nobody has to avail themselves of this program. This is entirely voluntary. If you've sued in the past, but for whatever reason there was no determination or no finality of that process, you can avail yourself of this private settlement program. If you avail yourself of this and decide it's not your cup of tea and you want to sue, and you still can under the statute of limitations, you can do that. So nobody is compelled to participate in this program, but it is a remedy for a group of people that I can relate to as governor, because I've seen them through many different forms of violent and horrific acts come to deal with this through therapy, through counseling, and through processing this event properly, but still finding a way to move on. So with that, I will yield the floor to Secretary Panetta.
Thank you, Gray. First of all, my thanks to the leadership of the 6 California dioceses for establishing this independent compensation program for the victims and the survivors who were sexually abused by the clergy. The hope is that we will finally provide a confidential process for seeking reconciliation and reparation for the victims of these crimes. It should also be pointed out that today it is now required that every claim of abuse must be reported to law enforcement, something that didn't happen in the past. And hopefully when that happens, it will lead to the prosecution of those who abuse children. It's important to emphasize, as Gray did, that this compensation program is independent from church control, and that the nationally known mediators, Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros, and incidentally, both of them have a tremendous reputation. I have great confidence in Ken's ability, particularly after how he handled the 9/11 claims and others. He's a very competent person to handle these claims. That they'll have the kind of complete autonomy that they need in order to determine the eligibility of the individual claims, and also they alone will determine the amount of compensation that will be provided to each victim. This program will be overseen by our committee, the Independent Oversight Committee, and I'm pleased to join Governor Gray Davis and Maria Contreras-Sweet in overseeing the effectiveness of this program, ensuring its independence, but most importantly, protecting the public trust that is critical to the fairness and the integrity of the compensation program. We will be issuing regular reports to confirm that effectiveness, and those reports to the public will provide the number of claims that have been filed and also the amount of compensation that will be provided. The time for providing this program is long overdue. My experience with this issue goes back to the beginning of this crisis in 2002, when I was asked to serve on a blue ribbon panel of Catholic lay people that was established by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. The purpose of the review board was to study the causes and the context of this crisis resulting from the sexual abuse that occurred, and also to try to determine why there was an inadequate response by the bishops and the leadership of the church. For 2 years, we interviewed cardinals and bishops and other church leaders, not only in the United States, but at the Vatican. We talked to priests and former priests. We talked to victims and psychologists and medical professionals. And the report, which was the first of its kind, was finally issued in February of 2004, had a number of findings and recommendations. But I want to share with you one comment from that report, which I think is important to remember, and I quote, "Ultimately, the crisis besetting the church is not a legal crisis, a media crisis, or a personnel crisis, but a crisis of trust and faith. And it is only by living out their faith by bishops and priests and the laity that the church will be able to regain the trust and fulfill its mission," unquote. Today, 15 years after that report, the church and all of us who are part of this faith are finally beginning to live out the tenets of our faith, recognizing the dignity of each individual and trying to regain the trust that has been so badly damaged. I again commend the bishops of these 6 dioceses for establishing this program, and I also would urge other bishops and dioceses to establish similar programs for their victims. I want to encourage everybody to pay careful attention to the documents that explain this process. They contain a clear commitment by the administrators and the Independent Oversight Committee to provide victims with a dignified, confidential process to seek reconciliation and reparation for the suffering caused by these unspeakable crimes. It is our hope that every victim will voluntarily participate in this program. Look, we can never erase the pain that you have endured, but we can assist you in the ongoing process of healing and recovery. Our prayer, our fervent prayer, is that this process in the end can provide some semblance of justice to the victims of crimes that for too long went unpunished, and provide the remedies that for too long have been delayed. It is never too late for healing.
Thank you, Leon. I'm having a lot of trouble with this moment. It's a very bittersweet moment. Yes, I'm delighted that the church has finally stepped forward with this important program, and we've all addressed our distinguished titles, but the title that affects me the most is being a mother. I can't fathom what it would feel like to be a parent of somebody who trusted their spiritual leader and was affected, was abused. And so to those people, I say, I wish I could feel your pain, but the truth is, it's unimaginable what you must be experiencing. I'm hoping that this moment, right now, right today, September 16th, is a reflection of a turning point for our Catholic Church. That is a point where we can say, yes, we're going to provide some compensation for the victims, but more importantly, that it become a day, a time and moment when we can say that the church has pivoted and has created a new culture where everybody feels that they can report something that is inappropriate. And so I urge every one of us to accept some responsibility to make sure that if we see something that isn't right, to speak up about it. I think many of you know that for my life has been an interesting journey. I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, and arrived here at the age of 5. And I was so taken in by this beautiful country where I felt that everything was achievable. I joined everything that I could to be a part of the solution, the Mexican American Opportunity Foundation to help children, the Children's Bureau to help children who were abused. And I went on to start a bank so I could help people who didn't have access, equal access to finance, have a solution. But I was not prepared for this, to have somebody who is your spiritual leader, someone in whom you put your entire trust, be the person who would be a perpetrator of children. And so I am so pleased that the Archdiocese of California, of Los Angeles, teaming with the Dioceses of most of, 80%, I believe, of California have stepped forward to provide a solution. Something that we have seen working in other parts of the country, in New York and Pennsylvania and other parts of the country, with these folks who have been trusted to do the same in other places like 9/11 and other situations. And so I have confidence in this process, but I want to assure everybody within the reach of my voice that if there is anything that doesn't seem appropriate, that doesn't seem like it respects the integrity, we will act. This group will act. I'm so sorry to be emotional, but I'm a parent, and there's nothing that can get me past the point of pain that these children, who are now many adults and have had a life that has really affected them, I just can't get past that. And so I want to assure you that I will be vigilant, as I know that these gentlemen will be that are flanking me here today, to make sure that this process is a good one, that it is respected, it follows the protocol of independence, and that there is no cap on what any person will get. And as Grace said, in the aggregate, we will hold the church responsible. Now, having said that, I also want to make a second point. And that second point is that there's so many good priests across the country and around the world who have left everything that they owned, who have left everything that they had to move forward and to provide us a place in which we could get enrichment and have healing and spirituality fulfilled. And to all of those priests around the world and here in Los Angeles and throughout the state, I say to them, thank you. I know that this has also been heartbreaking to you. It's affected your reputations. You've sacrificed everything to serve us, and somehow we all get tainted in the process. But I say, please, I hope that this step is an important point where we can now begin to heal and to turn a corner and to say we have a renewed faith in the Catholic Church. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'd like to now show a video with Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros, the independent administrators, and then we'll take questions.
My name is Kenneth Feinberg, and I am a co-administrator with my colleague, Camille Byros, in designing, implementing, and administering the independent compensation program announced today by 6 separate California dioceses in the state of California. Now, it is important that everyone understand a few of the important features of these compensation programs, which build on our experience in similar administrations of sexual abuse of minors by church officials in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and now California. Here are the critical features of this program being announced today by the 6 dioceses in California. First, the program is entirely voluntary. No individual victim who was abused as a minor by clergy, no individual is required by law to participate in this program. Each individual must decide for himself or herself whether they want to participate in the program by submitting a claim. The choice is entirely up to you. Neither the administrators nor the church have any say in any requirement that your decision as to whether to participate or not. Second, our work and this ICP are entirely independent of the clergy and the church. By formal agreement, the church has no authority whatsoever to challenge our determinations of eligibility, to challenge amounts of compensation that we offer individual eligible victims. Once we make that decision, this victim is eligible, he or she has corroborated the claim is credible, it ought to be compensated, and it should be compensated at a certain level of compensation. The church cannot question our bottom line decision. There can be no appeals by the church. Our decisions are final and are independent of the clergy. Third, the program is open and we welcome claims for a very limited period of time. Ms. Byros, Camille Byros will explain this in a minute. This is not a permanent claims program. This is not a court proceeding that could last years. There is a relative window of a few months for individual victims to file claims, and we will work with you in the processing of those claims. Another important feature of the program is the opportunity to be heard. Not only can you file a claim, a document, which we will provide you, but some claimants, not all, wish to come in and have an opportunity to meet with us by phone, by Skype, in writing, explanation. We welcome that. We welcome that. And this entire program, remember, is very important, is confidential. It's confidential. Many, many victims in our experience who were abused as minors by clergy years ago are fearful that their claim, their story, what happened to them will be made public. We assure all victims who file claims that the information that they provide, Camille Byros and myself, that information is sealed with us. It goes into the drawer. It will not be made public. If a victim wishes to go public with his or her story, wishes to tell the world what happened, the impact of the abuse, the effort by the administrators to provide compensation and to validate the claim, that is entirely up to the victim. We say nothing. The victim has complete unilateral authority to decide, not the church. The victim decides whether and to what extent he or she wishes to go public. But as far as we're concerned, the program is entirely confidential. No allegations are made public. We are working with the victim and require a sense of trust that the information provided us will be kept confidential. Those are a few of the important features of the program. I now ask my colleague in all of these programs going back many years, Camille Byros, also of my Washington office. We worked together for many decades. And I'll ask Camille, who is responsible for the day-to-day operation of these programs, to comment further. Camille.
We look forward to the start of our program on Monday, September 16th. That is the official launch date of the California program. What will happen on that day is for all of the known victims, and by known victims I mean the victims who have previously filed an allegation with each of the dioceses for past sexual abuse as a minor. All of those individuals will receive program packets. The packets will include the claim form necessary to participate in the program, the protocol, frequently asked questions, and information on how the claimant would like to be paid. Simultaneously, our website becomes live. It will be available in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. There'll also be an opportunity for registration of new claims, allegations never before brought to the attention of the diocese. Individuals who wish to file new allegations will register and provide us with the information necessary for us to make a determination on potential eligibility. Once we review the registration information, we will then move forward with providing those individuals claim packets as well. We look forward to working with the Oversight Committee. We look forward to working with Governor Davis, Secretary Panetta, and Ms. Contreras-Sweet as members of the committee. We're very anxious to get started. This program follows the very well-received programs in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And I'll turn it back over to you, Ken, for any further comments.
Just a few other comments. There will certainly be questions posed of Ms. Byros and myself, and Camille can comment on the deadlines that have to be met in terms of claims submission. This is not a permanent program. As in other states, we are setting up this program with the authority and blessing of the church, but it runs for only a certain window. That's point number one that Camille will comment on. And the second is, what if a claimant wants an opportunity not only to file a claim in confidence, but wants an opportunity to meet with us, to express their view, their opinion about what happened, about their current state of affairs, about the amount of compensation, anything else that might be on their mind in terms of an agenda. What if they want to meet with us? So those two other issues, timing and the right to be heard, I'll again ask my colleague Camille Byros to comment.
Well, with regard to the deadlines, there are two deadlines. There is the first deadline for the registration of new claims. That deadline is January 31st, 2020. The deadline for the filing of all claims is March 31st, 2020. Getting back to Ken's comment about the opportunity to be heard, we are available at the claimant's option for personal interviews via Skype, teleconference, video conference, totally at the claimant's option. There are times and incidents when the claimant prefers a discussion about the claim to provide more detail, perhaps detail that they didn't feel comfortable putting in writing, or just to have a discussion and explain more about the abuse and the effects on the abuse on their lives as an adult.
In conclusion, let me say on behalf of myself and Administrator Camille Byros, we urge all claimants, all those who were abused as minors, who have never been given the opportunity to file a claim, to receive compensation, to be heard about their claim, to have their claim validated by two independent, experienced administrators. We urge you to file the claim. We cannot help if the claim is not submitted. But if you submit the claim, that triggers this process, which will allow two independent administrators who have done this in other states to evaluate the claim, to reach out to you, to give you an opportunity to be heard. Only if you are satisfied with the process, with the eligibility determination, with the amount that is offered, only then are you required under the program to waive your right to go to court. That is a decision you and you alone, and perhaps your lawyer, will make. We look forward to implementing this program in California, and we look forward to meeting and chatting with you and receiving your submissions and working with you in an effort to provide you some small degree of justice in this harrowing experience. We thank all of you in California, and we look forward to implementing the program. On behalf of myself and Ms. Byros, we thank you.
Thank you. Ken and Camille, are you on the line?
Feinberg here.
Great. I want to open it up for questions. Please identify yourself and your media outlet. Oh, and we have a microphone.
Yeah, Osvaldo Borraes. I'm with Univision Channel 34. What about victims that perhaps in the legal system were not able to file their claims because of the statute of limitations? Is there a window for them to participate and perhaps get some solutions to their abuses?
Camille and Ken, do you want to take that question?
Camille?
Yes, I'll take that. So the overwhelming majority of the claims that we have in the various programs are claims that are currently barred by the statute of limitations. It has nothing to do with our program. It doesn't matter if it's time barred, we will accept the claim and we would make it eligible if it meets all the other criteria.
Great.
May I add, just as a point of clarity, it includes, just as a point of clarity, which is really important to me, is that it doesn't matter if you're documented or undocumented, everybody qualifies, and again, you can go back retroactively. Thank you.
I had another question. Also, my name is Margaret Carrero with KNX Radio. In the frequently asked questions here, it talks about supporting documentation for the claims. How does that work with someone who's never filed a claim before? Like someone whose statute of limitations has run out. Does that apply to them? Do they have to provide certain documentation, and what would that entail?
Well, there's a distinction between the known victim population and the newly reported. So let's start with the known victim population. For those individuals, whether they're time barred or not, we have received from each of the dioceses whatever files that they have on that particular victim. Remember, some of these victims have reported this abuse many years ago. So the dioceses have provided us with those victim files for, let's say, we're about just over 200 victim files for known claimants. For those who are coming into the program as registrants, who had never before made an allegation to the diocese or made complaint to the diocese, we ask for some sort of documentation, and that could be any one of a number of things. What's most particularly helpful to us is those individuals who have been in therapy or counseling, and there exist records of those counseling sessions wherein they discussed with their counselor the fact that they were abused as a minor by a priest in their local parish or church. Any other information that they have, correspondence, communication with anyone that they may have had in past years, talking about their particular situation, whether it's an email to family, friend, whether they themselves discuss this with an attorney or law enforcement. We work with the claimants to try and help them give us something so that we can move their claim forward and make it eligible.
This is Ken Feinberg. Let me add two other points. First, again, whether it's an old claim or a brand new claim, the statute of limitations has no application to this program. And as was just pointed out, whether you're a resident, a documented a citizen of California, an undocumented citizen, it doesn't matter. We're looking behind the legal niceties to determine the credibility and the eligibility of the claim. The new claims, where there's no track record in diocese files, are a challenge. As Camille points out, we're looking for some corroboration of a new claim. It may be medical records. It also may be circumstantial evidence that a new claimant comes forward and says that he or she was abused on a date certain, long ago, in a particular church, by a particular priest. And sure enough, we already know that that priest and that church on that day, there have already been other allegations of older claims that have been documented. So we try and work, as Camille says, with the claimant, whether it's an old claimant, previously expressed objection to the church, or a brand new claimant that comes forward for the first time with a claim. We will work with the claimant to be as non-adversarial and as proactive as we can be to try and include as many of these claims as we can and determine them to be eligible.
Great. Next question, and then we'll give you the mic.
Chris Ancarlo with KFI News. I have one just quick follow-up with Camille. I think I heard you say just over 200 victim files so far. Is that just for Southern California that those victim files, I guess, consist of? And then secondarily, for the committee, what's the kind of day-to-day operations of the committee in relationship with the administrators? What are you guys doing versus what are they doing?
Camille,
I'll answer my question. The 207 packets that went out today are names of victims of the 6 dioceses.
As for the committee, this is day one, so we'll be working with Ken and Camille. We'll also be interviewing for a victim advocate that will advise the committee. And we'll also be looking at potential counselors or therapists that may want to volunteer or participate in this program. I can't stress enough that money means a lot, but feeling good about the rest of your life means a lot as well. So we have a lot of stuff to keep us busy, and then I'd say every 3 or 4 months we'll probably issue a report, and that will require us to review the files and decisions that Ken and Camille have made, and if we feel there's any comment or explanation necessary, we'll provide it. If we don't, we'll just provide the report. I don't know, Leon, do you or Maria?
The purpose of the Oversight Committee is basically to obviously ensure that the effectiveness of the compensation program. If we have individuals that need special attention, that's why we're trying to get an advisor that can help us with regards to that. But basically, this is Ken Feinberg and Camille Byros that will be doing all of the decision-making with regards to the claims. They are independent, they are alone, they're the ones that make the decision. What we will do is try to when we can, provide a public record of the claims that have been filed and also the amount of compensation that's been provided.
Just for total clarity, again, it's really important to note that each registrant's entire file is kept confidential if that's what they prefer. They alone can decide to go ahead and speak out and report out anything that they wish. Our role is distinct in that we're providing just this assurance that the process is independent, that there is no holding back if somebody deserves more compensation, and just to make sure that the church itself is not involved, that the protocol is being respected.
One other point.
I just want to,
Ken, just one other point quickly. So on all the old claims where appropriate under state law, law enforcement is notified. On new claims, when Ken and Camille believe law enforcement under law is required to be notified, they will be notified.
And just to add to that, just to add another point to that comment, not only will the diocese need to report the new claims to law enforcement, but as a requirement for our program, we require the new registrant to also report to law enforcement. It's a dual reporting system.
This is Ken Feinberg. I just want to second what Governor Davis said a few minutes ago. What we have found in these programs around the country, a claimant who wants to chat or talk with Camille or myself in confidence, more often than not, it's not about the amount of compensation. What a claimant wants when they come to us or converse with us is validation of the claim. For too long, the claimant has been denied recognition. as to the credibility and validity of the claim. And when an individual wants to meet with Camille or myself or chat on the telephone or whatever, more often than not, the money is secondary. It is a desire to have the independent administrators basically say, we believe you. It's a credible claim. You are subject to eligibility. And that is something very, very important to individuals when they speak with us.
Thanks. Next question.
Randy Page with the CBS television stations in Los Angeles. About the confidentiality issues, as you know, many people who are here who are undocumented are extremely concerned about contacting law enforcement. So you're assuring confidentiality, but you're requiring them to contact law enforcement. Also, there are other victims who are very concerned about this information once it gets to the church. So my question about confidentiality is, because that's extremely important, as you know, to many of the victims, how can they be assured of confidentiality when other entities are brought into this and their stories are shared with law enforcement and also with the church? Just a couple of other quick questions as well. Why a limited time offer? If you're really reaching out to as many victims as possible, you're talking about a 4-month period. You could have thousands of people getting a hold of you. If the church is serious about really dealing with this, why would they restrict it in time to such a small amount of time? And one point of clarity, if you were not a minor at the time that you were alleging the abuse, are you not allowed to do this? Do you have to be a minor to be a part of this program?
I'll let Ken and Camille answer those.
This is Ken. Camille, why don't you go first, and then I'll go as well and answer some of those very, very good questions, I must say.
Okay, there are actually 2 deadlines. So there's a deadline for the registrants, which is January 31st, 2020. And then there's a deadline for all claims to be filed, which is March 31st, 2020. In all of these programs, not only the sexual abuse programs that we're running now for the various dioceses, but in all of our compensation programs, you need to have a beginning and you need to have an end. You need to encourage people to act and come into the program. And just so you're aware, we allow ourselves a fair amount of flexibility, excuse me, when it comes to the deadlines. We're not going to turn someone away who files a week or 2 later, or who calls us and says they haven't been able to put their paperwork together. With regard to confidentiality, under no circumstances do we provide any information at all to anyone other than the various dioceses, for obvious reasons. The claimant can protect all of their information, or they can choose to speak to whomever they wish. The press, their lawyers, their friends, whomever they wish to speak to. With regard to your question about reporting to law enforcement, we think it's a very important and a necessary step for individuals who haven't before raised a concern or complaint that we involve, or they involve, law enforcement in the information and the report of this claim. There are instances where there could be criminal charges brought against the perpetrator. So it's delicate and it's difficult, but we find it's a necessary component of the program.
This is Ken Feinberg. Let me just add one counterintuitive point based on experience, going all the way back really to the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund. Placing some deadline on the filing of a claim is in actuality pro-claimant. If you don't have a deadline, in our experience, eligible claimants procrastinate. They hem and haw. They're uncertain. They don't know what to do. When you place a deadline, even if it's a flexible deadline, and we work with the claimant, we're trying to incentivize claimants who have waited sometimes for years and years to try and get some degree of closure on this. to file the claim and trigger the program. We'll work with the claimant, but I remember in the 9/11 fund back in 2002 and 2003, 2/3 of the claimants in the 9/11 fund didn't file their claims until the last 90 days of the statutory 33-month period. People, for whatever the reason, vulnerability, emotional uncertainty, wait and wait and wait. And we think a claim deadline is actually a positive step to try and encourage victims to come forward and work with us in a non-adversarial setting.
I mean, if you were an adult at the time of the alleged abuse?
So Camille, the question about minors?
No, the program doesn't cover adults, so the program is restricted to minors.
Great. Next question?
Hi, my name is Natalie Brunel. I'm with Spectrum Networks. I was wondering if there are multiple claims against the same member of the clergy who happens to still be part of the ministry. Is there any sort of public notification, or does that perpetrator remain hidden?
So what happens in a case like that is we immediately report that information to the diocese, and the diocese immediately begin their internal review and investigation process of that particular priest. And each diocese has its own rules and procedures, but we will stand down and hold the claim and allow the diocese to do its due diligence and investigation of that claim. Most, and I will add, most of the dioceses will immediately remove the clergy from ministry pending the completion of the investigation.
But I guess just to clarify, if there are multiple people filing against the same member of the clergy, is the public notified, and will that be part of the reports?
We don't do that. We don't notify the public. That's a diocesan task.
Okay. Last question?
Alberto Godínez, KRCA, Channel 62, Los Angeles. I used to be in Sacramento and investigate so many priests over there those years. I have a couple of questions, okay? Number one,
Sure.
did we know how much money that committee will, how much is going to be the top that they're going to be able to say is how much is going to be paid? That's question number one. Question number two, how we can ensure that this is not a way to get customers for a attorney that it will make profit of this, victims. And I got a concern about the comment that Maria Contreras did. She was very emotional. Looks like she have already, it's an idea, and I had respect, and I'm asking this question without respect. I need a clarification. If you be sitting in the committee, we'll be able to not come up with your personal belief and be honest and make a decision not affected by your emotions, but by the truth of this great committee.
I'll answer that question. First of all, sir, there is no cap on this program. The dioceses have committed to us that whatever the amount of money is necessary to resolve these claims, they are committed to paying. With regard to your question about attorneys, a claimant absolutely does not need an attorney to file a claim with our program. They certainly may hire one. That's obviously that's their choice, but it is not a requirement of our program. But what is a requirement of our program is that we will provide an individual an attorney before we accept a signed release from that claimant. In other words, we want to be certain that every single individual, before they release and relinquish their rights to sue, understands that by signing that release and accepting the compensation, they are in fact releasing the diocese from any future liability. So for those individuals who don't have an attorney, and as I said, it's absolutely not a requirement, and the application form is relatively easy to complete. But for those individuals who are not represented by their own attorney, we will provide an individual to speak with them to explain the terms and conditions of the release. That attorney is not advising them on whether or not to accept a compensation, but they are advising them as to what rights they're relinquishing.
Let me also, this is Ken Feinberg, you ask a very, very difficult question about emotion. No matter how many of these programs over the last 25, 30 years that we have administered, unless you have a heart of stone, you cannot help but be impacted by the pathos and the tragedy surrounding these claims. It is extremely debilitating in listening to claimants file claims, express their the impact of the abuse, and you try and maintain as much objectivity as you can, as much professionalism. You try and treat claimants similarly, without bias, without any predilections or presumptions. But I must tell you, it is emotionally the most difficult part of what we do. It is not determining eligibility or determining compensation. It is hearing or seeing in writing and hearing from claimants the horror of what they've been through, and that is extremely difficult and is one of the challenges that Camille and I face every day in trying to be as objective and as professional as we can be. It is not easy, I must say.
Well,
Can
Ken just
like to add,
go ahead, Camille.
If I could just add to Ken's comments, we have probably sat through a couple of hundred meetings in person and on the telephone with the victims of child abuse by the various priests in these dioceses. And I must tell you, there are so many individuals that are so damaged, that are so emotionally damaged by what happened to them, that within 10 minutes into the meeting, a grown man of 65 years old will break down in uncontrollable sobs. So we have put ourselves in a position to be able to work comfortably with these people, and we do our best to make them feel relaxed and to allow them to continue to tell us their story if that's what they wish to do. And these people who wish to see us want to do just that. They want us to understand that this trauma that they experienced is with them forever. It never goes away.
All right. Well, I think they've answered the question very nicely. I think it's just important that you are connected in some way emotionally, and that you're not distanced and callous about the process. And so we will approach it with all the sincerity and genuineness, and some level of empathy for the situation, to the extent that you can be empathetic.
I just want to make one last comment relative to your hypothetical question of several claims against the same priest. I'm confident that that will come to the church's attention, and they have pretty rigorous systems in place from roughly 2007, 2008, and I'm sure that priest will hear from his superiors.
Great. And with that, thank you all very much. I always like giving the governor the last word. And let us know if you have any further questions about the program. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.